Welcome back to We Got a Pack Show. Today I'm going to grade the playoff teams on how their future is aligned. We have to talk about the Emmanuel Clase Luis Ortiz situation. It's going to be a good day. Okay, so I think it's pretty well established that we need to discuss this Emmanuel Clase Luis Ortiz scandal. Now, there's a lot we can get into here, obviously. I think that goes without saying. However, I have one main takeaway. Quick recap. Clase just pled not guilty today, hoping that's the case. Obviously, we don't want to cast any judgments. Boneheaded move. If he did it, I don't think we have to spend any more than about 3.5 seconds on that. I think that's pretty well established and well understood. Here's what I have to say about it. A little bit of a different angle from a lot of the stuff that I've been hearing. I don't know how much this specific situation has to do with a direct correlation with what I'm about to say, but I think it reflects the sort of cultural revolution in our game. And what I mean by that is there's been a massive shift over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years into a very individualized sport in a way that it was not for the entire first 150 years of its existence, okay? We're now seeing teams, quote unquote, assuming the role of a collection of players trying to produce as much as they physically can, right, individually as a sum of those individual parts en route to obviously a completed product to win the game, right? It's, hey, if you're a pitcher, how many innings can you get me? How many outs can you get me? If you're a bat, right? How many home runs can you hit for me over the course of the year? How many times can you get on base? And then you put that all together, and that's sort of the cultural strategy of the game today, right? Is like I said, a collection of 25 or 26 players now, right? That all add up to some cumulative amount of value. And the idea being, the larger that cumulative amount is, the more successful you're going to be. And I'm not going to get into the effectiveness, right, of that strategy from a winning and losing perspective, but this situation reflects that a lot. And I just sort of realized this today as I started to think more deeply about it, because something like this never would have happened 10, 20 years ago, right? And I know that's sort of a bold thing to say, considering it's one hopefully individual moment that is completely disconnected from anything else going on in the game, right? I'd like to think it's not happening elsewhere, but it very well may be. And obviously there were scandals throughout all of baseball history. However, I think what this reflects, like I said, is the players seeing themselves as one isolated piece of a puzzle that is the organization, the team, the roster, in a way that it really wasn't. Really all of baseball, but I can only speak to what I've seen, right? Let's say early 2000s, post-steroid era baseball, it was 25 guys working together for a common goal. And again, I don't know how much that directly influences this particular situation. It's, that's not to say that it caused this. It was obviously a stupid, boneheaded move by a couple of guys, if it turns out to be the case that they did it, obviously. But I just tend to think that the more we move away from a sort of collaborative effort, we're gonna see more stuff like this. And I don't know exactly specifically what stuff like this would be, because I'd like to think this is never gonna happen again, but I just don't like the way the game, or where the game is headed in that regard. This sort of mentality of, let me just do my job, and everybody else will handle theirs, and then we'll all be successful. Again, I don't know specifically how much what I just said pertains to this situation, but it just reminds me of that cultural shift in the mentality of these players today, and I don't like it. So I don't know if you agree, disagree, let me know. And again, I'm not sure what role that plays in this entire situation and how it's going to continue to play out, but I don't like it. I don't. Sorry. Okay, before we move on, guys, I've talked about, if you didn't see it on the story, now's your opportunity with code SWINGSRNSAVE, and being the ampersand sign, SWINGSRNSAVE, to buy a bat, a whole piece of lumber, and get another one entirely free, premium quality materials, fully customizable. These SR bats are changing the game. Head on over, use that code, grab a stick, grab another one for free, and get moving, hitting some bombs. Let's go. Okay, so enough on the World Series for now. It was an incredible series. We'll circle back to it next week. We got a lot more to cover, but I want to do something a little bit different. So obviously the entire season wrapped up, not just that individual series. And what I like to do after all the cards sort of unfold and we get to see everything we've been imagining, right, for the entire last 9 months come to fruition, right? Which teams eventually succeed in October, which is all we really care about right now that all of that's sort of shaken out. I like to look back and look forward at the same time at all of the teams that made the postseason in 2025 and how they're positioned for the future. So what we're going to do is I'm going to score each playoff team of 2025 on a scale of 1 to 10 with how open their window is, in my opinion, right, to win another championship. I don't want to waste too much time. We got 12 teams to get through, right, so we'll start in the American League. The Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox are a really interesting team. They're a young team. They're managed very, very well, and they have an incredibly strong culture to the point where, to be honest, I think over the last couple of years, they've outperformed their talent, their abilities on the field because of Alex Cora's managerial prowess and a really strong culture. Now, they're probably going to lose Alex Bregman to free agency, and I don't think they have enough there. I think they have, like I said, a lot of young players, but not necessarily guys that project to improve. I think if Roman Anthony comes back healthy and plays obviously the way that he did last year, that's going to help a lot. But if they lose Bregman, they really have no firepower on either side of the ball, right, offensively or defensively. They have a lot of really good pieces, a lot of depth. I don't see them taking a next step. I think they've sort of exhausted all of their talent because of how good they are in the dugout. So I'm going to give the Red Sox a 5. Right, I'm not going to go below 5 because I think they have strong pieces, like I said, and they play the game the right way. But I don't really see a future for them in the short term. I think in the long term, perhaps if they can add a couple more big-time pieces. The New York Yankees, obviously a team of note. If they lose Cody Bellinger to free agency, I don't like to get into the weeds of social media and all that, even though that's what I'm about to do in the next 10 minutes, actually, now that I think about it. Removing the Yankees from his Instagram bio, it's not good. If they lose him, they'll look a lot like the Blue Jays, to be honest, but a sort of dumbed down version, right, with Aaron Judge spearheading everything and basically solely responsible for their offense. Now, the Blue Jays play the game with a lot more energy and a lot more juice, and so I think they're able to sort of squeeze out a little bit more from some of their role players, some of their depth players, in the ways that the Yankees weren't really able to muster this year down the stretch. And what I really am concerned about, if I'm a Yankee fan, is they had a lot of overperforming players, right? Let's just call it what it is. I don't want to tear down any of these players, obviously, but Trent Grisham, Ben Rice, Austin Wells at times, some of the starting pitching as well, probably going to take a step back. I think the only guy you can really expect to take a step forward is Anthony Volpe. I'm a little bit biased because he was a teammate of mine growing up and he's an incredibly good guy, but I would be shocked if he doesn't bounce back and have an incredible year, especially coming off of an injury. I'm actually going to give them a 6 because I think they have more firepower than the Red Sox, and obviously they're a stable blue blood franchise that's always going to figure it out in some regard. I don't see much of an opportunity for improvement in 2026. The Blue Jays, I'm going to give them a 9. And I hate to do this, right? Because that's sort of the obvious team who won the pennant and young, really exciting talent, obviously, in Vlad Guerrero. And George Springer sort of brings a veteran presence to the lineup. And Bo Bichette is rumored to maybe be leaving. I don't really see that. I think he stays. I don't really have any sort of empirical evidence for that, but I just feel that in my gut. But they have everything you would need, and they play the game the right way. And contrary to kind of what I was saying before, I do think, one of the things I love about them is the way that they actually play on the field with energy, with passion, with balance, right? They can do everything. They can play defense. They can hit for power. They can hit for contact. They can pitch. They can pitch in all levels, right? And in starting pitching, the bullpen found a lot of nice pieces that you weren't really expecting, and that is largely due to a really strong culture with a front office that knows what they're doing. So I'm going to give them a 9. Unless Bichette leaves, I don't see any reason why they would take a step back, and even if he does, they have a lot of depth and a lot of players that seem to just step up in big spots. The Seattle Mariners. I had a hard time with the Mariners all year. They had a really weird year, right? They started as this team that could not hit for anything, right? Then they went on this insane run, and then they ended the year kind of in the same place as a team that couldn't muster any offense when they needed to. And the pitching was a little bit disappointing. It was supposed to be this incredible staff, and it was strong, but I think it was a little bit underwhelming for what we were expecting, especially given that Brian Wu had such a good year. You know, I would think that guys like Logan Gilbert and George Kirby, who was obviously banged up and unfortunately throughout the year, would have been, you know, guys that really stepped up down the stretch in the postseason, and that wasn't the case. And the bullpen as well, right? The bullpen struggled a little bit, and we weren't really expecting that. So Cal Raleigh had obviously one of the largest breakout seasons I've seen in a while. Can't help but imagine that he's going to maybe take a little bit of a step back. He still hit only about 247, I believe, and you know, that doesn't really bode well. I think home runs can kind of come in bunches, but I'm going to give them a 5 as well. I think they're in a similar situation to the Red Sox, where they have some really nice young pieces, but nobody that I really expect to take a big leap in 2026. The Detroit Tigers. I was hating on the Tigers all year. Similar situation, couldn't hit. They're a really interesting team. They have so many players that didn't even necessarily have an unbelievable year. I think their highest average was Dylan Dingler at 278, but just rose to the occasion when they needed it. Obviously, that massive collapse left them in a predicament, right? Missing out on the division title, but they stepped up and they showed something really impressive in the postseason that a lot of teams don't have, right? And that's the ability to rise to the occasion against high-level pitching. They did that against Cleveland. They did that against Seattle, right, for most of that series. Tarek Skubal, I think if he gets hurt, which is always a concern for a hard-throwing starting pitcher, they're in really bad shape, because he basically put that team on his back in 2025 and carried them all the way to Game 7 of the division series. But they got a lot of interesting pieces. Kelly Carpenter is an outstanding big game player. Again, very similar to the Red Sox. Young, do things the right way. They don't really have enough juice to get them over the top against an elite team, right? You can't depend on these guys to play as well as they've ever played in their lives, 9 of them, let's say, on the offensive side, in the biggest moment against the best teams, right? Eventually you're going to run out of juice. You need a superstar or two to kind of figure things out when stuff isn't going perfectly. So I'm going to give them a 5 as well. Like, they don't have the juice of, say, the Yankees, right? But they're headed in the right direction. The Guardians, I believe, were second to last in the league in hitting, in average, in 2025. But again, a team that just seemed to figure it out late in the game in a big spot. I'm going to give the Guardians a 7. They are the epitome, to me, in the American League at least, of a strong front office that knows what they're doing and gets every bit of juice out of their players. They seem to always pitch well, and I think a lot of that has to do with the staff, the coaching staff, the catching tandems that they've had, and they have to add a piece. They really do, but Jose Ramirez is an absolute cornerstone player that you can build around. He always steps up when you need it. Brian Rocchio had a really nice postseason, and again, they just scream clutch. And I don't know what it is about them every year, regardless of who they have, but I think if they can add a big piece, I would like to think they have the ability, the resources to do so. I would put them ahead of every other team in the American League right now, other than probably Toronto. So I'm going to give them a 7. Let's move on to the National League. The Cincinnati Reds, I'm going to get them out of the way. I don't want to hammer them. I'm going to give them a 1. I think they're done. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't see it. They looked completely overmatched against the Dodgers, and there's no offense here. The pitching is young and promising, but has really not amounted to much. If Rhett Lauder comes back healthy, I think that changes things. Elly De La Cruz, I don't get it. I really don't. Pretty sure he leads Major League history in strikeouts over the first 3 seasons. His vision in MLB The Show was like 38. I think that's generous. It's really difficult to score runs when your lineup is spearheaded by Stevie Wonder. So I'm going to count them out. I'm going to give them a 1. Same situation with the Padres. I'm not going to go as far as a 1, but I think they're done. I'm sick and tired of the Padres, to be honest with you. Since they fired Jay Stingler in 2022, their culture has been a disaster. You can even see it at the end of that series, in the Wildcard series, right? Whining and complaining about one individual bad call, as if that would have made or broken their season, as if they had any shot of beating any team that they were going to face down the road, whether that be the Brewers, the Dodgers. They never, ever play well when it matters most, and they don't make enough contact. I'm going to give them like a 3. I don't see it. The Phillies, my team, I have to do it. I'm going to give them a 6. Right, very similar situation to the Yankees, just because they still have so much talent and produce such a strong culture over the years. I can't give them any higher than a 6. I mean, They're probably going to lose Kyle Schwarber. I don't necessarily hate that. He's been a great player for the Phillies, but I don't think that's the style of baseball that they historically like to play. I think he's replaceable. He's a great player. He's done incredible things, especially in big spots. Bryce Harper has been a disappointment. He's showing his age a little bit. Same thing with JT Realmuto. Certainly had a nice year, but Trey Turner, he was the only player to hit over 300 this year, I believe. But again, in big spots, I can't really trust him anymore. And same thing with Castellanos. They have a lot of guys that you kind of expect to always be there. They're producing year in, year out, and in 2025 in big spots, that wasn't the case. A lot of guys that, look like they're sort of on the decline. So I'm going to give them a 6. The Dodgers. I'm going to give them a 10. What can I do? I hate to do it. I do. I don't want to give my 2 highest grades to the 2 pennant-winning teams, but I have to. The Dodgers show no signs of slowing down. They're young with incredible veteran leadership as well, so really, really balanced in that regard. They have everything you need. I don't think we need to waste too much time. They're well-run. They're deep. They're balanced. They do everything well. I'm going to give them a 10. The Brewers. I like the Brewers. I've liked them for a long time. I think that they've been well-run. Even moving on from Craig Counsell, I think even since then, they've added another year to that culture. Young, again, a lot of young teams in the postseason, which we're not used to seeing, but it seems like Prime is getting a little bit younger. But they do a lot of things really, really well. They pitch well. They have a lot of arms with really good stuff, like a Freddie Peralta, like a Jacob Mizorowski, who you'd expect to be a little bit more volatile, but they have command and they pitch well in big spots. I think they need a little bit more juice offensively, but I think if they can add a piece, they're in really good shape. Jackson Chourio looks like he could be a superstar. Sal Frelick is a really nice piece, both offensively and defensively. And William Contreras is probably the best hitting catcher in baseball over the last couple of years. So I'm going to give them an 8. I really am. I just love the way they're run. They looked overmatched against the Dodgers. I think if they can add a piece and maybe rely on the Dodgers to sort of tail off a little bit after sort of 2 long postseasons, obviously, I can see them winning the National League in 2026. I'm going to give them an 8. And finally, the Cubs. I have a hard time with the Cubs because I love watching them play, but they don't have enough. They're great defensively. They're very reliable. You kind of always know what you're going to get from the Cubs. Up the middle with Dansby and little shout out right there. Again, like I said, they're kind of dependable, but you never really trust them to raise the bar against a really good team. I don't think they have enough juice. They don't have enough offensively. Not a ton of power, which I don't necessarily mind, but they're very, very one-dimensional offensively, and it's really difficult to beat these teams like the Dodgers, for example, who are just loaded and eventually are going to score runs when you kind of have to scrape and grind for every single run. And that's what I feel like when I watch the Cubs, and I love watching them play. They're exciting, they're well run, they have an unbelievable fan base, but I think it's just too difficult. It's too strenuous for the Cubs. For the Dodgers, for example, it's just free and easy. So I'm gonna give them a 6. They have a long way to go, but I do like where they're at. And that is going to do it for today's show. As always, thank you so very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. Great to have you here. We're moving along. Obviously, we're just getting going, episode 2, but we're going to continue to build some momentum and clean up the areas where we could be a little tighter. So thank you for bearing with us on that. And remember, keep your eye on the ball and your love for the game. Hope you enjoyed. Take it easy. Have a great week, and peace.